Okay, good evening once again. So let's start this session today. So as we all know that today we'll be talking about gender and politics, and we'll be taking up the second part which we missed yesterday. Okay, so we'll be taking up the economic issues from the point of view of a feminist view. Okay, so in this discussion, let's move ahead. But before I move ahead, let's just have a recap of the things that we have already talked about. So far we have talked about the various kind of theories that we have related to feminist theories, right? We have also talked about various kind of theories where we needed, or there was the need for a gender sensitive lens. And then when we are using gender sensitive lens, we talk that what kind of questions do we need to ask to address the issues which are gendered in nature, or which are related to the gender issues in general, right? So we have talked about these. And this class today will be picking up the issues which are related to the economic aspect, right? Yesterday also we talked about the security issues, and when we were talking about security issues, we defined the security issues as per the feminist perspective, and we found out that everything, or let's say almost all the aspects of security in the world, are somehow related to the happenings, or related to the developments or the definitions which are basically dominated by the masculine attributes, or are masculine in nature. So basically states are continuously fighting for a major share of power, and therefore the sharing of power is such where each and every state is trying to have more and more power, right? On the other hand, the kind of definition that we saw as per feministic um, perception or view was this, that for feminists, the security meant diminution of all forms of violence, including physical, economic, and ecological, right? So this is the discussion that we already had. Okay, today we will be starting with the economic discussion, and we will be trying to let's say have a discussion on the issue related to the participation of women in general, and how they are treated in economy in particular, right? So today, as we start, there is something known as gender division of labor. Now, to understand what is gender division of labor, we need to go back to the origin of capitalism and how this gender division of labor started, right? So there is a certain foundation which is deeply rooted in our histories, and therefore there is a historical foundation to this complete discussion, right? So whenever we talk about the historical foundation, there is one thing that we need to remember, or we can often talk about the discussion that we have is that what kind of um, institutions were there prior to the, let's say, onset of capitalism or industrialization. So when you will talk about this, you will find out that before the onset of capitalist society, or before just this industrial revolution, the kind of society that we used to live in was the one where both, let's say, men and women were participating in the daily household chores, and many of the tasks that were there in the society were basically household tasks. And the profession that was basically followed was the kind of profession which was transmitted from one generation to another generation. So let's say usually if you have a family which works with, or whose primary let's say occupation was to be the work of pottery, then in this case the all the members of the society, or let's say this particular family who are potter, will be working as potter. So let's say the wife is also doing the work, and she is steeping the utensils or the clay pots and such things. The man is helping her, and then man is working with the similar stuff, let's say about baking it and all, right? Similarly, as soon as children attained a certain age, they naturally inclined to it, and then they also involved into it. And therefore what we saw was this, that the kind of profession was somehow generational in nature. It was passed on from one generation to the other generation subsequently, right? So this was the particular fashion in which the primary motive of occupation, or the prime means of occupation, was dependent on complete family, and thus the participation of both men and women was almost equal. Now, as the participation of both men and women was quite equal, one thing is quite evident, that the status of women was also shared equally, and women were not regarded as, let's say, as housewives, right? Rather, they were also a kind of breadwinner. And therefore, the concept that we have in present society of let's say, men acting as breadwinners for the family and women acting as housewives was something which was not as predominant as it is right now. Okay, and this happened because with the onset of industrialization, with the onset of capitalism, okay, something happened. Men now move from their houses to the outside areas. So let's say earlier, family, if a family is involved in agriculture, both man and woman were involved in the various procedures which are there in agriculture, right? Starting from sowing of the seeds till ripening of the or let's say harvesting of the crop, right? However, with this onset of industrialization, industries usually were localized centers, and therefore men needed to go out and work in industries. Now, as this happened, the kind of contribution that men had towards family changed. And therefore, although both of these people are working, let's say both the genders are working, men are working in factories at this particular time, and women are working in their houses. Okay, so men were getting paid. However, the let's say their female counterpart were not getting paid, and therefore the term came out, which was the breadwinners. And therefore, men who were working primarily in these sectors, let's say in the industries, became known as the breadwinners, or those who are practically winning the economic battle. And therefore, we saw that it was then ascribed that the general nature or role of a woman was to work in, in domestic sectors, or let's say in those areas which were not that labor intensive, right? Now, something again changed with the onset of World War, right? So what we are seeing that suddenly the complete market structure of economic forces, or let's say of labor forces, changed. Okay, men became the major contributor towards the labor, and those areas where labor intensive work was not required, or even if labor intensive work was required, it was let's say restricted to the household chores. Okay, those were ascribed to women. And over time, this complete concept got transmuted, or let's say got translated into a format where when women were generally, or let's say slowly over time, were socialized in this manner, that now when a woman grew up, or let's say when a girl grew up into a woman, it was automatically pre-assumed by her that her primary role in any society or in family is to stick to the household chores or to the domestic chores, right? Now what is happening basically is, nowadays women are working a lot, okay, but their contribution is not getting included into the economic let's say datas, right? And therefore the work that women are doing are also works, but they are somehow not creating uh, the kind of income that usually men do, right? So women right now are doing a lot of work, but they are not generating income. And this is just because of the kind of setup that we presently have. However, if you will go back to the scenario of World War II, you will also find out that with the, let's say, outbreak of World War, something happened. And it was this, that with the outbreak of World War, suddenly men had to leave their jobs in factories and then had to go to battlefields. And with this, women ultimately had to move to these areas or to the factories. And therefore, you will find out that the rise of feminism or the revival of feminism also somehow is linked to this particular incident, and is, or let's say, started growing after this era. Okay, so what is basically happening is that as women went out again to the factories, it was realized by the society in general that women in no part or in no way were inferior to men in either performing the activities or let's say operating machines. And then women were as capable as men in generating income. And therefore arose a kind of movement in the Western society, which again had the impact throughout the world, throughout the globe, okay, which is generally the feminist movement. Okay, so somehow the backdrop of feminist movement is the outbreak of World War II, and then active participation of women in economic activities related to industrialization or in industries or in factories, right? So this was the general issue. However, this complete thing didn't go well with the society in general. Until date, women are seen in a fashion or in a manner where their contribution towards the economy is not considered to be that great. And therefore, you will see that still, till date, there are issues or there are cases where the kind of work that a woman generally takes up are not that machinery heavy, right? So you will find out that where are actually women working in these time. Okay, so if you can recall, if you can see, look around, you will find out that women are basically involved in teaching jobs, right? So the first choice of a woman in this present situation also is to move towards the teaching job. Then the second field that is much more opted by women is the one where one is the telecom sector or this software sector. And similarly, you will find out that in manufacturing sector also, women are employed not in all kind of manufacturing, but in manufacturing industries which manufacture, let's say, mobiles and the tablets and phones, okay, and those things. So what is basically happening is that the role of woman has been naturalized. Okay, so what is naturalization? That women have been socialized in such a manner that right now they believe that they are not suited for certain industries well, right? And this is not just the belief of women, rather it is the belief of even the industry or the industrialist in general. And therefore you will find out that if you will find out that what is the percentage of participation of women when it comes to mechanical engineering, you will find out that women in mechanical engineering are much less compared to men. Similarly, you will find out that the this ratio just changes or inverts itself when you talk about let's say electronics, or if you talk about telecommunication engineering, right? So you will what I am trying to mention over here is that again there are certain areas which are dominated by the women. So when we talk about primary education, there is a lot of dominance of women. And this is for one more reason, that women right now are not only considered suitable for certain jobs, rather it has been naturalized and it is now in their brain, and it is in the let's say natural um, assumption of the companies that men are suited for certain kind of industries and women on the other hand are suited for several other kind of industries. And due to this, women are basically exploited also, right? How are they exploited? You will find out that as soon as, so who are these women who are working in an industry, let's say who are working in primary sectors? You will find out that these are basically unmarried women, right? And as soon as they get married, okay, the company either fires them or they automatically quit the job, right? So basically what is happening, a woman even in present era are working till they are married, and after their marriage they are settling down, right? So this complete the institution of marriage is somehow is again dominated by the masculine attributes that we talk about, right? And therefore you will see as soon as a woman is married, her decisions are never her decisions, her choices are never about her choices, and it changes a lot, right? So what is basically changing is the way in which uh, men and women themselves have a look on themselves, right? So how are they looking at themselves? They are looking themselves as a weaker sex, okay, or as those who are, let's say, who are contributing lesser towards the society. So what's the way out? The way out is that this division of labor that we talked about needs to be rethought and needs to be, let's say, changed or needs to be relooked once again, right? So this complete concept of men being the breadwinners and housewives, let's say, or women as housewives is a flawed concept, okay? Again, you will find out that even though that women start working, they continue to bear a double burden, okay? Now what is the double burden? Even if a woman is working in a particular sector, let's say if a woman is a teacher, she will have to return back to the home and then prepare the food for the family, and she will have to take up the caring jobs, okay? And therefore the softness of woman or the feminine gender that we usually talk about, or that is usually perceived, is used as a tool even for exploitation of women. And therefore you will find out that what's basically happening is that uh, in the era, okay, so in 1980s, certain US companies or who used to prepare athletic shoes, okay, found it hard with the rise of feminist movements in the USA to employ women. And the labor, suddenly the women labor force, started to ask for a greater share or ask for the equal payment for their work compared to their male counterparts. Now, to overcome this or to tackle this issue, what women did or started a revolution. And as they started the revolution, the companies, athletic shoes making companies in USA, shifted their base from USA to Korea. Now, as this shifted to Korea, and as this complete, so again in Korea, they found out cheap labor, and women were employed in these sectors, and the labor continued to be cheap, right? Now, again, after some time, as this movement reached Korea, women in Korea again started having certain, let's say, movements, and therefore, as the result of movements, it became tough for these companies to operate at the same input cost, and therefore they tried or they slowly moved out of the Korea to China. So the terms of business were again negotiated with China, and this complete work, or let's say the complete factory, shifted to China. So what I'm trying to emphasize over here is that the complete assumption that the kind of service that women provide are basically caring in nature, and they do not require much money, rather they just require the money that is useful for sustenance, right? Now, what is sustenance? Sustenance means just to survive, right? So usually the kind of wages that companies pay to these women are sufficient only for sustenance, only for basic survival. However, if the same job is done by men, they usually perceive a greater value, and it is just assumed that men will should be paid more, just because they will have to take care of their family needs also, right? So this complete onus of having a family, of maintaining a family and taking care of family, is still seen as a predominantly a task of man and not of a woman. But the condition, or but the reality is quite different, because we see that even till date there are certain women, and there are a lot of them who are working, and who basically are or can be the only source of income for their families. And as they are only source of income for their families, the mere amount of money which is provided to them as the cost, which is just sufficient to meet the sustenance needs, is somehow not sufficient for them. And therefore when one needs to look at these issues, right? And again, the industries in which women are primarily employed are soft industries, okay, which are like primary education and so on. So we have talked about these, and we have even talked about the exploitation of by the companies, right? So let's move to the next slide. Now the question arises, if it is so, okay, how can we use this information, okay, or how can these be changed, right? So we have talked about two kind of theories when we're talking about the feminist approaches or feminist theories. And in that theories, we talked about the liberal concept in feminism, and then we talked about the post-liberal concept in feminism, right? What was the argument of those who were liberal feminists? So liberal feminists were arguing that if you change the laws related to these um, sectors, or to laws related to women in general, change will slowly come into place, right? So according to liberal feminists, the way out for this is to provide women a kind of security, okay, on the behalf of the present law and policy. And therefore there was a movement throughout the globe, starting from 1970s or late 1970s or mid 1970s, okay, to change. And there are certain changes which has been done, right? So we won't talk about them in detail, okay, as we'll be talking about them, all of them, when we'll be talking about United Nations for Women, So that will hopefully be a lesson soon. So I won't go into detail of these developments that took place on United Nations. Rather, what I'm trying to say is that what's the way out? So one of the way out is to, as per liberal feminist, is to have a better policy, both at the international level and then at the national level. Right? Similarly, we can also have better policies at other levels, or let's say at social levels. Now, one needs to think that is the level of policy sufficient enough to bring about certain changes in society in general, or in reality, right? So you will find out that, or let's say the other group of theorists, which we combinedly called post liberal, okay, will continue to fight, right, or will continue to think in that manner, right? Now, as they will continue to think, you will find out that their argument is this, that their that the mere change in laws or the changes in legislation is not going to bring about real change in reality, right? And therefore they argue that real change is required in the process in which we have a look, or we how we perceive the relationship between men and women, right? So they will talk about the relationship of between men and women, both at the national level, or how they are seen in the policy or by the policymakers, and at the same time at the family level, at the social level, and at the individual level, right? So these are two concepts. Now let me just outline certain let's say activities, or certain developments that have taken place, which have uplifted the kind of role that women are now playing in today's world, right? So in 1975, so when are these things starting? These things are again starting from 1960s and 70s, when the feminist movement basically started, okay? And when these things, or the complete idea about having women at forefront, or using the gender lenses, a gender sensitive lens, to look at the policies, all the policies, let it be security issues, let it be economic issues, and so on, is the recent development, which basically matured itself in late 1980s, right? And it is still in the process of maturing itself, right? So there are now, yesterday I asked you people to read about two social organizations. One was Seva, and the other was Dawn, right? So today I will just give a brief review of the developments that basically took place. Right now, there is one more thing before we move to this. These both organizations are, let it be Dawn, let it be Seva, are NGOs, non-government organizations, and therefore we see that the kind of change that we now see at the United Nations level, at the international level, is nothing but a change which took place due to effort of certain NGOs. And you will find out that the kind of development, or the kind of change that actually took place, is still done, or is still initiated by these NGOs. And in this form, NGOs have played a really a huge role in shaping the policies related to women, and even policies related to climate change, and so on. So you will find out that the masculine nature, okay, or the policies which are generally considered to be masculine in nature, or as associated with masculine powers, let it be issues related to security, let it be issues related to the rights of slavery or slave people, okay, let it be issues related to rise of capitalism, industrialization, science and technology, okay, upgradation of warfares, okay, all of these things were talked about in history, or were talked about throughout the history, okay, much long before this complete movement. And talks these talks, which are related to the feminine aspect of human character or human nature in general, let it be using diplomacy, or using let's say soft powers, including culture, okay, or using taking up the issues related to climate, taking up the issues related to animal welfare, okay, these are recent developments in history compared to the other things. So men have been talking of war and peace since long, but men haven't been talking about ecological issues, let's say rights of animals, okay, rights of let's say third gender, rights of LGBT groups, right, and so on. So what you will find out that with the rise of feminism, the scope of policy has also broadened, And in most of the cases, this has been led by several NGOs. And therefore, the role of NGOs or non-government organizations has been, let's say, recently recognized by the institutions at global level as recently, right? So it is a recent development. Okay, fine. Now let's move ahead in this discussion. So here is the list that actually what happened. So there are certain things that we just need to have. So in 1975 we had first women conference on women. Then in 1976 to 85 it was declared as UN Decade for Women. 1979 we had Seward. Okay, so all of these things are basically happening, right? So what is Seward? Seward is Convention of Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women. So you will find this in your notes. Okay. In 1970, you had Second Women Conference. In 1985, there was review of UN Decade for Women. In 1996, UN policy included gender mainstreaming. Okay. In 2005, we have something is known as Beijing Plus 5. Now we will again talk about Beijing Plus 5 and its review in other classes. Okay, what I'm trying to pick up in today's class is this: UN policy including gender mainstreaming, right? So you will find out that prior to this era, the policies or the data that we had usually did not focus mainly on the kind of development that we have when it comes to development for women and development for men. So data were not segregated, they were together. Now, as they were together, it was quite difficult policy to analyze.
Right, you need raw material, find alternate material. You need.
As it was difficult for policymakers to analyze these data, okay. Therefore, in 1996, UN took up two issues. Number one, it was this that UN finally decided that it will work on gender mainstreaming. Gender mainstreaming means that they will promote, okay, inclusion of women in their institutions, okay. And apart from including women in their institutions, they also decided that the data that they were collecting will now be segregated on the basis of gender, right? And therefore, soon after we had the concept of this human development, okay, this data which was tracked for human development was also segregated in the data related to male and data related to female. Now this plays a very important role. How it plays a very important role? Because unless and until you do not have the real data, the policy formulation becomes a tough task, right? And therefore it becomes a huge issue, or let's say it becomes a huge role for men and women both, right? Because it allows the complete humanity or humans in general, or let's say the complete world people in general, to have a look on real impact of gender talks, or real impact of a gender on issues like security, economy, as we talked about, right? So here is the discussion. Right now, I asked you people to have a look on these two organizations, which are Seva and Dawn, and therefore I'm not going into the detail, as we just talked yesterday, that this is something that you need to do. Okay, I will just cover up this, which is gender development index. Okay, now what is gender development index? Gender development index, segregation of data on the basis of gender, right? So this is something which is basically happening. Okay, right. Now, let me just pick up this issue, that what are the parameters or indicators. So you will find out literacy, life expectancy, school enrollment, and income calculation, which is gender-based income calculation, is the parameters. So when we talk about school enrollment, so data will find out that what percentage of women were enrolled, and then what percentage of girl child were involved, and then what percentage of male children were enrolled. Similarly, when it comes to life expectancy, the data will be segregated, and then it will be adjusted, okay, against certain other parameters to come to this particular index. Again, this complete discussion is a part of economy, and it will be discussed in detail over there. So I'm just skipping this part too. Okay, now here is just a picture of Seva. Now, just to pick this up, that what Seva exactly is. Seva is Self-Employed Women's Association. Okay, it was basically started in 1972 in the city of Ahmedabad. Okay, so it started in Ahmedabad, and then it became a worldwide movement. So when I say worldwide movement, it became a worldwide movement in the sense like it inspired the changes that we see, right? So if you can recall that we in the previous slide we talked about a certain um, changes in the labor policies. So the kind of changes that we now see in the labor policies related to home workers was basically initiated by this group, which is Seva. Now, Seva is the Indian group, and therefore I'm underlining this because this practically gave the world a real approach that how feminist or feminist movements can really help to change the society or to help the change of status in women of women in general, right? So here in this particular image, you can see Hillary Clinton is there. Okay, she is from USA, a well-known popular figure. So she is there. She is inspecting, or she is with the woman of Seva, and she is basically having a look at how Seva works, right? So what is your job of, or what you can do is that you can try to find out that what are other aspects of Seva, or what are the other activities that Seva does. So basically, what is Seva? Seva is an NGO. Okay, it works in the field of organizing women. Okay, organizing women as cooperative societies, and then providing them certain opportunities so that they can work in cooperative societies and can establish themselves. Right. Apart from this, Seva has also worked a lot in creating the kind of knowledge that is required. So it has worked on accumulating the data related to women. It has worked on spreading the message, which is the feminist message, that how the life of women can be changed, or how the perspectives that we talked about have the impact in real world. So all of these has been talked about by this group, right? Similarly, it has been phenomenal in initiating similar organizations throughout the globe, right? And therefore, it becomes quite important for their discussion. And this is on your onus that you will have to do this. So we'll find out that in 1996, okay, so ILO's Homework Convention, the legislation that was passed, was basically due to the effort of this group, which is Seva, that it got passed. So in this sense, you will find out that it is an international phenomena, just like Amnesty International, okay, when it comes to rights issues, okay, and it is a group, great group. So you need to find out more about this group, right? So with this, the discussion of the class is done on my behalf, okay. So let me end this. So it's your turn now. Just if you have some questions, you can ask. Okay. Apart from this, one last thing that I need to ask you people to do. Okay. There are certain things that we talked about. See, I will just summarize them. We talked about gender division of labor. We talked about how women are considered fit for certain industries only. And then we talked about what is flexible labor and why women are considered flexible labor, because it is easy to hire and fire a woman, right? And then we talked about that women were only paid a part of amount which was considered sufficient for sustenance. And then we saw the role of NGOs in how they can shape and work for gender mainstreaming, right? So this is the part of discussion that we had. Okay, with this, my task is done. If you people have some question, you can ask. Right. Remember one thing, that I will be picking up all of these things in detail when we talk about these things in the optional classes. Right. We will be picking up several other examples apart from this. Okay. Right. Any questions from you people? Quick question? Hai?
No, sir.
None. Okay. Who was this? Anyways.
Sachin here.
Sachin. Right. Okay. No questions then. Fine. So let me just end this discussion. किसी और के पास कोई question है? There is somebody who just joined now. Okay. 7089. Okay. Suddenly you missed everything. Class is over now. Okay. Anyways, you can see the recorded lecture. आप recorded lecture देख सकते हो. It will be available on the YouTube. Right? Anyways, so class end करें? कोई question या कुछ भी?
No, sir.
Right. So we won't be having class for next 2 days. Okay. So I won't be available. So somebody else might be available. So the task, or let's say what you can take from my side as task, is just whenever we meet next, we'll be talking about a different issue, which is the issues related to hunger and development. So we'll try to figure out what hunger is, how it is defined in the international politics, and how it is defined in India, and then what development is and how it is defined in international politics and in Indian politics, or in Indian polity or governance. So we'll talk about that. So you can work on that. You can, let's say, do your preparation on that, because as I move, I might move a bit faster. Okay, so आप उसके लिए तैयारी कर लो पहले से ही. Okay, so no questions. तो आगे बढ़ें फिर. So let me just end this. Okay, I have a comment. Okay, thank you, Manoj. Right? Okay, so let me end this session. Have a nice day. Keep on reading. Keep on revising. Did you people get your notes? आपको मिला वो?
Haven't checked yet.
Check नहीं किया. So check your email ID, and in case you do not receive it, contact us back. Okay. But as I think आपके पास पहुंच गया होगा. Okay. चलो. So let me end this session. और अगर आपके पास नहीं भी पहुंचता है, तो जो आपका ये रिकॉर्डेड सेशन है हमारे प्लेटफॉर्म पर percepts.in पर, ओके, उसमें जो अगर आप डेमो सेशन में जाएंगे तो ये क्लासेस वहाँ रिकॉर्ड है. उसके नीचे में आपको ये जो नोट्स हैं वो डाउनलोडेबल फॉर्मेट में आपको मिल जाएगी, राइट? सो यू कैन जस्ट गो टू देयर, यू कैन गो टू द स्पेसिफिक लेसन टाइटल, और उस लेसन टाइटल में आपको वीडियो लेक्चर भी मिलेगा, उसके नीचे उससे रिलेटेड जो डॉक्यूमेंट है वो भी मिल जाएगा. ओके, सो इन केस यू डू नॉट गेट इट ऑन योर मेल, just do this, obtain it from there and use it, right? Chalo, have a nice day. Good day, take care.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, good day, bye bye.